Well, so maybe we'll just go in that order. I'll go Eric, Mark, and then.
If you are presenting, hop on the Zoom. Brent, did you get the Wi-Fi? Are you on the Wi-Fi?
Oh, I'm not. I'm on my phone.
Yeah, you can hop on the Wi-Fi if you want.
Okay.
Okay, I'll.
No,
You don't have to. Yeah, out of
Is
it.
it
Out of
is it-
view from there.
like support?
It's a Vasion guest, and the password is
Say it again.
eliminate.
Eliminate.
Yeah, if I were to eliminate you.
I shall try my best without GPT. Spell
Getting
that.
personal. It's not about eliminating print servers. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Can
Well, let
you?
me turn it on. I will say I was impressed with Brent. He did not connect the audio.
I heard the rumors, but I shouldn't do so. Makes sense.
All right, you should be good now, Tom.
Alrighty, guys. So this is gonna be pretty casual and I guess light talk. This is a tool, React JSON schema form. That I think is kind of neat. So I'm gonna share it with you guys. It's a way to basically generate forms based off of the JSON schema. So the way that we are using it at Apollo is when people are integrating their apps into the platform, right? So perhaps Invasion has some, I don't know, integration with third-party print server or something, right? And they need to get their customer to input their client ID and client secret to get that connection to work, right? That the client ID and client secret might be a different set of keys and values that you need for a given integration. So we're using this to basically declare what we want based on of a configuration. And so this is what it looks like. Right, we're generating these forms. Not very pretty right now because it's a work in progress, but you can see it's doing its job. So that's what we're using it for and what it does. The nice thing about it is it's built off of the JSON schema spec. So that specification, let's see. So this is like this is similar to Open API or Swagger. It's a schema specification that there's a large community around that has a whole bunch of tooling that you can, extend it with. So it's not an isolated thing. There's a broader community of tooling built around these JSON schema, which is nice because then you can reuse that schema for your resources in different areas. The other thing is that it's extensible and also customizable in its theme. So right here, you can see it's got the base theme. But if I wanted to select any of these, boom, boom, follow we're using Material UI, right? And so plug this in. Now it's using Material UI. And then if you've extended your Material UI with your own theme, like we have, see, our theme is not very pretty, but still our own. You can see that we haven't had to do anything with our UI, with our code. All we've done is we've given it an object, and then we already have a system, a design system, and now we have a form system as well. If that makes sense, it's way too not to write code as much code anyways. Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand. So the JSON schema is basically the premise that every object should already have a predefined schema that you just tapping into, like that you're gonna follow?
Yeah, yep, exactly.
So
So,
a car, you could just look up what the schema of a car would be. And then just
oh, you're thinking of the schema org or whatever, right?
Oh, okay, this isn't the same thing.
No, but so this is a way to structure your data. A JSON schema is like a way to structure your data that is consistent, right? And this actually looks a lot like how you'd see in the Open API spec. If you have a resource or a component, you'll see it has a lot of the same properties like title, description, required, and then properties. And so that's one thing I wanted to show here. At Kala, we're using Protobuf Open API, and now we're using JSON schema as well. And we actually have some tooling to go between those. So this app resource right here was something that we defined in a Protobuf. We generated our backend and our front end now, and also some of the API connectors in between. And this is the form it generates for us, right? Let me share my code so you can kind of see what this looks like.
So you have like certain connectors that you support, like you had HubSpot or things like that, right? And so you have schema defined for what's required to integrate with them.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then you don't build the forms yourself, you just throw it through this tool.
Yep.
So to add a new integration, you just add a new schema and you're done.
Yeah, because like with Salesforce, you need to have a subdomain, and same with Shopify, right? And then in the future, other things maybe you need, I don't know, something else. So yeah, it gives us the flexibility to basically have a consistent UI that's also, you know, customer dependent. Let me share what the code looks like.
Are you okay sharing this code on a recorded thing?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Well, let me know. Okay, so. Oh, yeah,
We always like it.
yeah, no, that is one thing though. If you ask Copilot to write your code, there's the syntax by itself is kind of complex. And so it'll get some things wrong when it's trying to like declare a use state and all this. But if you can simplify it into like a really just straightforward JSON object, then your chat GPT is going to do a lot better at translating those things. So I think this actually is a good way to take better advantage of those tools. So basically right here, that form I showed you, this is generated from our Open API spec right here. I've just copied out the app resource that we have. And then I have a little mapper function that takes that Open API and then converts it to a JSON schema format, right? And so you can see here's what I'm doing. Just I know specific things will go in different places. Supposing I had custom components or different formats of string fields that I wanted to have particular UI for, I could just put it right here and this is consistent across board for all of our forms. And then, yeah, in here you have all the type of things you would expect from I guess that's not going to be happy. Data NID. All the different things you'd expect from basically like a standard UI component. So yeah, I like it. I think it's cool. I don't think it takes away any of the utility that you get from React. I think it's just a good way to align things and yeah, and make things more consistent and stable and easier, faster, better, greater, stronger.
What if you do custom components?
Yeah, okay, so let me show you. It actually has a really good way to do that. And that's so here. So this is actually a custom component right here. And the custom part is this. Need help finding your client ID? We've made it so you can put in Markdown. It will be rendered to Markdown UI, right? And then all this comes in with it. So the docs for any particular form field, you can include with that form field. So that's a custom component. The way that you make it work is you register it as a widget with your JSON schema form, and then you can use it by referencing in a UI field. So yeah, that's the overview. That's what I got. I think it's neat. You guys should try it. There's also, like I said, JSON schema is not just a React thing, it's much broader than that. So there's backend tooling with it. I did see that there's a Vue JSON schema form project as well that looked very similar to this. I expect that if you're using one of the popular frameworks, you probably find some like this. So please clap. Thank you. Right? Yeah.
Stood up, so.
Okay. See my screen. So, just curious, who here uses mono repos in there? Okay, cool. Who here has used GitHub Actions for their workflows? Okay. Cool. Good people. Who here has a team bigger than like 10 in that model? Cool. Well, this might be relevant to you guys, and the rest of you probably will be relevant at some point, I'm sure. So we've gone pretty heavily into mono repos at Weave. And so we use NX. Tom mentioned NX in the last meetup as a mono repo management tool. That's really good. It's got a lot of really cool features. We've gone heavily into that. So we have about 50 services and about 7 different apps that we serve from NX. And pretty soon after using mono repos, if you have a decent sized team, and if you run required status checks, I guess I should ask who uses, who makes feature branches and does a pull request into main? That's the same thing. So, has anyone run into where you make a pull request, you've got some status checks that take a few minutes, and then by the time they're done, it says you need to update your feature branch before you can merge into main? You ever had that? Okay. So our feature checks take about 15 to 20 minutes because we have a gazillion Cypress tests. And we have 40 engineers. And so, well, 40 front-end engineers. And so they're all merging into main all day long. And so by the time your status checks are done, you have to update your branch. And then you have to run your status checks again. And then you have to update your branch. And it just, you can't, you wait until midnight to get lucky. So it was becoming a problem. I don't know if that's been a problem for other people, but if you get big enough and you don't implement some kind of merge queue or merge train system, you're going to run into that. So GitHub just released merge queue. So I'm going to talk kind of how their implementation is. I know GitLab has a merge train feature. And I think Jenkins has some kind of merge chain of some kind. But let's just kind of show you. So here is a screenshot of our merge queue from Day. So when you make your PR, there might be 10 other people that have just made a PR. And you, in our case, what my goal was to make it so that you could throw a PR into a merge queue and not have to run any status checks. And then all the status checks run inside the merge queue. So what happens is when you move your, actually, I'll show you what you get out live. So this is a PR that I made a few days ago. And right now, I can't actually put it in the queue because I need a reviewer in my, I couldn't get anyone to approve it. So, show you. And with my admin privileges, I can only merge straight to main. There's not like a skip skip to the requirement. So I can't show you that, but if that were approved, I could send it into the merge queue and show you. What it does at that point is that anything else that's in the merge queue, it'll bundle it up into your, it'll make a branch, like a little temporary branch, and it'll have all the code from all the previous ones that are added to the merge queue. So all of your code is up to date with main in the merge queue, and then it'll run the status checks. And that's it. And then it moves. So then when somebody else's finishes, then yours moves up the queue and it runs the checks again. Just keeps doing that. So really the responsibility of the developer is make the PR and push merge into merge queue. The problem with that is that it'll automatically merge when it's ready. So there's, so for us, some things we do that we can take advantage of while the PR is open. And one of that is like create a build. So if we want to create a build, we can get a preview link. So this using NX, we know that this PR affected 3 different apps. So it made a build for all 3 apps right here. And it also ran this bundle size checker. So I can check how much my bundle changed based on these changes. So what we've implemented is a labeling system. So if you add certain labels, it'll run different status checks in the while the PR is open. And then when you're satisfied, you can send it into the merge queue. And then if you fail any status check while it's in the merge queue, then you get this message. It'll get kicked out of the queue, and then you have to just deal with it again, try to figure out what happened. And you can see what happened here, which things failed. I failed a type check. So that's a general overview. There's been a lot of feedback. Nobody's tried this. Nobody's used merge queues here. So they're pretty new. I don't even know if everyone's been given access. We've got access. And so we've been going through it. I gave them some feedback too. It seems like everybody's asking for a few things. And one of them is to have different required status checks for putting it into the queue versus merging it into main, because I don't want anything required to get it into the queue, but I want lots of things required for it to merge into main.
Like do your type checks. Seems like that would be better to do in advance, so you wouldn't get into this situation.
So you wouldn't get kicked out of the queue if something failed.
Because those don't take.
No, they take about 3 minutes because you have to run npm install. And, we could probably make that better, but I don't require it. If you want to just take your chances and throw it in the queue, you might as well. If you want to run it before getting into the queue, you add that label, run type check, and then you can see it. So everything is opt in while your PR is open, and then everything's required in the merge queue. But the problem is you can't specify different requirements in the queue versus merging into main. So there's one way to get around that right now, and it's to use skip logic. So if a job skips itself based on whatever it knows, whatever context it has, then GitHub will consider it succeeded if it skips itself. So here I've got the main CI/CD. So when any action that deals with a merge group, that's a merge queue, happens, this will trigger. It'll also trigger on main, and it'll also trigger on any of these pull request events. And then I run this get instruction. So this is kind of where the magic happens. So I have to do a lot of info gathering, figure out which PR it was, which is kind of hard. I asked them to make that easier. I have to figure out what the labels are. If you're in the merge queue, you don't have any information about the PR anymore, which is annoying. So I asked them to give us that. So I have to use the GraphQL API to get that information. And then I figure out which labels they have. And the reason for that is, let's say you made a PR, you used all the labels while your PR was open, so you ran all the status checks, and then you merged it into the queue. We wanted to make it so you don't have to rerun those checks once it's in the queue. So it'll check to see if you have the labels already. It'll check to see if you're at the front of the queue, and if you are, then it doesn't run those checks. There's a lot of logic to make it do all of those things correct. So then we just have logic. What should it do? Should it run the build? Should it run the test? Should it run the lint? And if those are true, then the job here, so like this is my build step, it has an input of skip. And so if that's true, then it skips. And then, so in the PR, it considers it skipped, it's succeeded, it considers that succeeded. So it lets you put it in the queue. And then in the merge queue, it's never considered a skip unless it's at the front and it already has the link. So it's just a good way to manage your workflows. Been working really well.
How long does it take for you to get stuff to your merge?
In the middle of the day, there's usually about 5 or 6 things in there, so it can take it lumps things together. So actually, I'll show you some settings with merge queues. So it's actually branch protection. It's where you set this up. And you can set it to queue them together. So I'm saying don't ever do more than 5 at once. And minimum pull request to merge 1 or after 5. So it's kind of on like a throttle system. Just together. So yeah. For us, if it runs once, it takes about 15 minutes. If it runs twice, it's like 30 minutes. So usually it's just once. Yeah. But the nice thing is the developer doesn't have to be the responsible one to keep on updating it. So they push it in the queue, they're done. And they get a Slack message that says your stuff's been deployed. Yeah, I don't have any questions.
Wait, the way that it works is you put it in the queue, someone updates main, then it reconciles that code that was in the queue with main, and then reruns whatever things need to rerun. Or is there something else?
This is the normal update branch. Like if you were to click that button, right?
So usually you would update your branch, right? You don't do that anymore. You still can actually if it's not in the queue. But once it's in the queue, the only way for code to get implemented is through the queue. So it already knows everything in the queue in front of you. So
Oh, I see.
you don't have to keep reconciling with main.
Gotcha.
What is, so if something failed before you, then it would basically just eject that from the queue
And then it
continues to.
and then it reruns. So in that case, it reruns. It reconciles because now let's remove that code from the bundle. Gotcha. Yeah. But if everything succeeds ahead of you, it doesn't have to do anything.
What if you click that administrator box and merge straight to me?
Then I don't know. I've actually done that quite a bit. I think it has to refigure that out. I don't know. It'll do it.
In process PRs.
Yeah.
What's your thought process on not requiring the checks before adding to the merge queue? But then obviously it makes sense to require them to get into main, but why do you not want them to be required to put it in the queue?
Well, think about why would you? So they can use the checks, right? It doesn't hurt anything for it to go into the queue and fail, except it might slow down people in front of them. But
Slows down and cost business. I guess there is a cost there.
there's a little cost, yeah, but that's all. I just didn't think that cost was justified.
I guess you get the cost either way. You run them before or because they fail and come back
Yeah.
out. There's just more developer intervention there.
We run Husky pre-commit checks, so it runs a lint and it doesn't run type check. I've thought about adding that as well, but most of the time people know when they have type issues, and then if they don't, they find out. I know. I found out. I don't know. It's something that we're constantly still evaluating whether
Modifying it, this is what I've got, the sweet spot, of not wasting too much of your time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
When do you resolve conflicts? Is that before you hit the merge queue, or is that,
Yeah, you can't merge it into a merge queue if there's conflicts.
so all of the code that's merging into your queue, the conflicts would arise before?
That's a good point. So if someone puts something into the queue that has conflicts with a branch, you're saying, yeah. Your branch doesn't actually know that there's conflicts at the time you're putting it into the queue, but then it finds out.
So that's a reason to get rejected.
I've never actually had that happen to me. It seems like it would be more common, but it'll know if there's conflicts with main. I'm sure they're gonna add that functionality soon. They're still adding a lot of features to this, but. This is GitHub Enterprise feature, right? Oh, really? It's just.
I'm pretty sure it's only enterprise. I feel like I saw that in that press release. For now.
We're moving to GitHub Enterprise. I want to take advantage of this in our.
Could be, not yet.
I tried to get it on my personal account, I couldn't, so.
Makes sense. Yeah.
All right, cool. That's it.
Yes. My presentation is a little bit different than the last couple. I didn't focus on like a specific technology, just like something that I'm passionate about. So it's more of like a slideshow type-ish format, but hopefully you guys are cool with that.
What's your name?
Oh yeah, sorry. I don't have a slide on that. It's like, oh, sweet. So I'll have to open this meeting again real quick. Apparently I didn't have screen recording. Okay. There we go. Okay, cool. Yeah, my name is Mark Abraham. I currently work at Entrada, and I have 3 years of professional experience so far. My interests are disc golf, video games, and weightlifting. So here's the name with some extra information. Yeah, and my topic today is maybe programming interviews aren't irrelevant. And before you guys bring out the pitchfork and torches, yeah, so kind of bridging the gap between core computer science principles and modern web development. That's like really kind of like the main crux of it. Although I think the programming interviews kind of give like a good like example, like a real world example of like why this is important. So let's dive into that. I feel like this meme kind of encapsulates how like most interview or like programmers kind of feel about interviews. Like, yeah, thank you. Just like sometimes programming interviews can feel like really contrived and like unintentionally, like unrealistically difficult. And like then you get to your job and you're like, wow, I don't actually have to think about or like have to do anything like I learned in my programming interview, right? It's almost like programming interviews and your actual job are like two different things you have to learn, right? And this is something I've been like pretty passionate about for a little bit because like as programmers, I feel like the most like lucrative way for us to like level up is to get good at programming, right? So it's like, it's obviously a worthwhile skill to learn, but also one that's like easily forgotten. So yeah, like programming interviews kind of typically focus on like our core CS skills, right? Like, so like data structures, algorithms, system design, stuff like that. It's not like the stuff that you learn in school, you know? And the problem with another meme is like we kind of evolved like in modern web development, right? Where it's like we don't have to think about any of those things really. Like we don't have to think about memory management. like a lot of the times, like the libraries and packages that we use have like underlying data structures and algorithms that handle all the, like the heavy lifting for us. Which is awesome, right? Like if you don't have to reinvent the wheel, then like why should you? But at the same time, I think it's important to recognize like the foundation that we're built on, right? Because like typically, unless you kind of understand that foundation, it's hard for you kind of to push the industry or like your company kind of further, right? So yeah, don't use an NPM library for like stuff. I saw one the other day that was like add two numbers together, and I was like, come on, guys, we've taken this too far. So yeah, like the point of my little lightning talk is basically just going to be find ways to intentionally go out of your way to like practice your computer science skills so they don't atrophy. Because like, in my opinion, having them like in the back of the mind as you go throughout your daily kind of like workflow really helps elevate the culture of the company and just like your own morale, I feel like. And to illustrate this topic, just like a little example situation. It's like imagine you're building a web app. This one says it needs to store and retrieve large amounts of data such as user data, blog posts, comments, etc. The application also needs to handle a large number of concurrent requests and must respond quickly and efficiently to user interactions. So like, I kind of feel like if you like threw a dartboard, like 90% of the time, a software engineer would be doing like this. Like, I don't know. This is like pretty similar to like what I see a lot of software engineers doing. And to like frame this example, we're going to have like two different developers. But Kyle, nobody here is named Kyle, is there? Okay. Yes, Kyle's about to take the beating. He uses like NPM packages for everything. He doesn't care like what runtime and space complexity are, and he just like is totally dependent on ChatGPT and Copilot for like coding everything for him. And on the right side we have Chad, and Chad is like he gets it. You know, he's like a strong CS. He like thinks about speed and like efficiency when he's designing systems, and he uses the correct tool for like the right situation. He doesn't try to like throw the same tool at everything. So here's like an example problems, like building off our example from before. So let's say their project manager asked them to write a function for a web app that will receive two arrays of users from separate databases and find any users with matching emails, like something that you might actually do, you know? So hopefully, sorry, that might be kind of hard to see, but so, oh, wish I could zoom this. Can you guys read that? If not, I'll just kind of cover it. So Kyle, in like kind of his naive approach, is like, oh, this is easy. I'm just going to loop through each of the user groups in 2 for loops, and then I'm going to stop on any email that matches and throw it into an array, and that's when I'm going to step back, right? But if like you pay like close attention to this, you realize that like as those 2 user groups expand, this is going to become like a severe bottleneck, right? Because it's going to be an O of n times m like time complexity operation. And so obviously that's not going to work at scale. Whereas Chad, on the other hand, he recognizes, he's like, oh, this could easily devolve into an n squared operation if I'm not careful. So I'm going to capitalize on appropriate data structures to prevent this bottleneck. And so he actually throws the first email group into a dictionary, and then he does a lookup on the second array using that dictionary. So it's actually a constant time operation, which results in of n plus m time complexity, right? But like small difference, huge, or like small change, huge difference in like result, right? Because one of them could result in like a very bad bottleneck for the company, like very early. I think just like kind of the wake up call for this is like this kind of stuff happens in real life, you know? He's not here, but Ammon Taylor, who's like one of my good friends from here, he sent me this article and just talked about how in 2017 there was a Cloudflare incident where they accidentally exposed a bunch of sensitive information like cookies, tokens, and HTTP bodies. And after conducting like a debugging session, they found out that the mistake was basically just like, it came down to like a simple error kind of in like an HTML parser that had to do with like basically like simple kind of poor like time complexity type things. But the external impact was like massive, right? They had to scrub this information from like big search engines, and they had to like make a public announcement about like, sorry, we accidentally leaked some sensitive information, which obviously never is good, right? So yeah, like there's real consequences to like not learning or not practicing this stuff. So yeah, my call to action for everyone is like, make time to practice the core principles of your discipline. I think a really good way for me has been practice interviewing, right? Like it really does bring it like face to face with you. It's like, do I know my stuff? Like, do I understand like why this code sucks and like this code doesn't? And can I like talk about it, in like a coherent way? I think thoroughly inspecting your colleagues' pull requests is like another really good way. Just the other day, I was like looking at a pull request, not anyone that on my team had written, but it was like literally like 4 nested for loops. And like, I don't know, it's just like when I see stuff like that, like alarms are like going off my brain, like as soon as this scales at all, this is going to be like the worst performing code on the planet, So I think keeping your colleagues like checking them, is like really important, and checking yourself too. And then if you use code helper tools, like try to spend some time with them off, like if you've kind of done yourself like becoming kind of reliant on like Copilot or ChatGPT, like try to turn them off for like an hour or two and just make sure that you can like still do the stuff that is important for your discipline. And last one is to be like Chad, because it looks like a Jedi. Cool. Any questions or comments? I know it's like pretty straightforward, but I feel like it's a good kind of reminder for all of us.
Speaking of ChatGPT, knowing at least the terminology and what kind of algorithm you're going to want for a specific use case. If you write that in the function definition, like with good terminology, it'll actually write the implementation really pretty well, because those have been written a gazillion times.
No, for sure.
And so just knowing all that, just the terminology makes a huge difference.
For sure. Yeah. I think that like you have to know the right questions or like the right prompt, right? To like ask ChatGPT, because like it might spit out like just like a super bad algorithm, like without knowing. And you're like, unless you have the know-how to be like, no, I want it to be this time complexity, then it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, good point. Very good point. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for watching.
Give permissions to share my desktop. Let's do that.
You never shared your screen before?
Now with this computer, this is my work one.
I think I've seen your screen before.
I think so. Hopefully. No link again. No computer audio. Screen, desktop. Yeah, there we go. All right. Okay. I'm Andrew Lewis. I work at Bayesian. I've been in the industry for about 3.5 years, so relatively new. And I'm going to talk about Pocket Base and just building fast version 1s of software. This is a pretty selfish presentation. I really am just giving it so that I can hopefully get feedback. Kind of like this Cunningham's law, where you throw something out into the internet, throw the wrong thing out, and then someone will come yell at you and give you the right answer. So that's kind of my goal here, but we're in person, so hopefully people will be nice. So, but feel free to tell me if you disagree or if you have other ideas or things like that. So why build fast? I think that moving fast makes the problems that we're just going to run into like less painful. If you go spend 2 years working on a project and then it just was for nothing, that's really painful. Whereas if you fail really quickly, and you're able to recover and then move on, and you figured out something you learned along the way, you're doing a lot better. I think in this little strip, if they would have just like made a call or something, that could have saved a plane trip ticket, which I mean, maybe was worth it for the vacation or something. But there's like simple things that could be done to go shorten things. There's always going to be miscommunications and problems that cause issues. So let's just minimize them by being quick. So how? I think the stack that we use matters. I've spent like a couple months as I started working on my own personal projects, really looking into what stack can I maximize my time with. I only have a couple hours. I don't want to code every minute of every day. It's not me, but I would like to work on things outside of work. And so how do I do that? First thing that I found as I searched was that using the tools that you know is probably the better thing. Maybe not in the long run, but it takes a long time to go learn all the gotchas and the tricky little things about a programming language or a stack or something like that. So that the right stack might just be what you're using at work or what you're already familiar with, even if it's maybe not the best fit. Kind of contrasting that, use the tools that have the batteries included if you're trying to make something fast. So when I asked devs that I respect and looked things up on the internet, I found a lot of people that suggested .NET and .NET Core for backends, and almost all of them said that it was basically that they just have everything that you need. So it's super easy to just spin something up and they've got error checking and other things, and it just makes your code better and faster, easier to deal with. So those two might kind of conflict because you might be in something that doesn't have those things. And so maybe you need to make an investment and go move to something that has all the batteries and is well suited towards what you're doing. But I definitely think stacks matter. And then don't worry about scaling for now. I definitely think the scaling matters, but when you get to a version 1, if you're so stressed about making sure that it's going to scale up to 1 billion users or whatever, then you're probably never going to get to where the version 1's done and you can get it to a user. And that causes that same problem where you end up flying halfway across the world only to realize your customer doesn't have a computer or something like that. I have a quote from Jeff Dean that I heard in a distributed systems class that I thought was pretty good. Ensure your design works if scale changes by 10 or 20 times, but sorry, this thing's right in my way. Anyways, the right solution for X often is not optimal for 100 times. And so they were talking about really big things. Maybe this doesn't apply to all projects, but if you're building big table or a lot of the backbone of Google, they found that like trying to swallow the entire elephant at once was too much. So just scale in chunks and then grow as you learn. So Pocket Base. This is what I ended up going with my own personal project. It definitely is probably not for everyone, but it seems to have worked so far for the project that I'm working on. It's like Firebase, that's where the name comes from. Base, I believe, stands for backend as a service. So it's kind of a no-code tool. Maybe doesn't fit all the time, but I think it can be a really valuable tool for iterating really quickly and getting something in front of a customer. So advantages for me are it's open source. I'm a little bit paranoid. I'm always worried if you go use Firebase or whatever, and maybe you become dependent on it, Google raises your rates or something like that, and then your business is no longer viable. This is something that you can just use yourself. That comes with its own issues, but it's nice to be able to go in and dive into the code base. It's written in Go. I like Go a lot, and the code's pretty easy to read. I've gone through the code base. It's not anything too complicated. And it uses SQLite. And the cool thing about this is that you can compile the entire thing into one file, basically. So you got a folder for your data, but you have one binary, easy to deploy. I just have a $4 DigitalOcean droplet that I secure copy a file over to. That's the entire deployment process for now. You get auth and file storage. And then for me, and I'm not super familiar with Firebase, I think this is a unique feature. Pocketbase, because it's open source and you can see it and it's just imported into a Go package, it's extendable. So you can use it like a framework. So you can, if you want to add your own middleware or add something, some sort of special endpoint, you can totally do that. I've done it. It works pretty easy. All right, so I'll try and do a quick demo. Pocketbase in Boston. Feel free to stop me if I go too long. So this is the Pocketbase admin UI. So you run Pocketbase and you automatically get this. I've deployed this for free on fly.io. And so you have collections. These would be kind of like your database tables. So we can go and create a collection. Maybe I'll create one, employees. And I can go create fields on that collection. And there's a lot of different options. It's definitely not as flexible. It's not going to be as fast as going and hand coding that SQL. And I think that's an okay trade-off as long as you understand that you're making it. And then down the road, go move over into some handcrafted SQL once you know what the product's supposed to look like. But I can go and set all sorts of minimums and different data types and make sure that they're unique. There's also pretty cool API rules. So I can say who can access what, and I'll actually, let me go over to my actual project. It's a little easier to show this. So here's the collection for my actual employees table for this app that I've been working on. And I have API rules set up for this, kind of messing around with multi-tenant abilities. So I just require that they always have an auth ID, which would be the token, because you can just leave it open if someone was just visiting your site without an account. And then I always make sure the district is my tenant in this case, that the district matches the district that's on that row in the table. So because of this, you can only access your tenant's information. It was pretty easy to set that up. I just threw that on a couple of those. That was a recommendation from the maintainer of the project. One of the things I really liked was this. They have an API preview. So this straight up gives you the code that you would need to go. So they have an SDK for JavaScript and for Dart. It shows you this is how you go and get your collection. And this is how you'd filter it and go query that stuff. And they have all your normal CRUD operations along with some other cool stuff. There's logging. Pretty cool. It's definitely not going to be for everybody or for every project, but I feel like the advantage is that you can spend like an afternoon probably going and figuring out, okay, what's my data shape look like? And then testing it. You're immediately going to have an API that's accessible, throw up a UI, and then go demo that to users and see, is this something that's viable? Would you pay for this? Or does it need to be drastically different? And if it's drastically different, spend another afternoon just reworking it. It's a pretty quick process. Yeah.
So with that, you showed the code snippet for the JavaScript. Is the SDK making like dialing a connection to the database, or is there like a different like?
Oh,
API
yeah. So
layer?
there's an API layer in Go. Yeah.
Okay. Is that like conforming to like a open API spec, or how does that?
I don't think it's open API. Basically, everything's a collection. So it's all kind of the same call. So if we look at this, actually shows it pretty well. So everything you're calling towards a collection, you give the collection name, and then you can pass filters based on that. So it's all kind of the same REST endpoints, if you think about it, but they can handle multiple things. So
You could theoretically just flush the network, copy the request, put it in Postman or whatever if you want to play with it.
oh yes, yeah. You definitely don't have to use the SDK. Let's see, there's a couple other cool things we see. My deploy is pretty cool. This is more of a feature of Go. Not the deploy, but the build. You can embed your UI. So this admin UI is embedded inside of Pocket Base. And then I went and embedded my own UI. So I showed you. You see that okay? Maybe make it bigger. So this is the project that I have. I just have a UI folder. That's a view app. And so when I want to go build the whole project, I just run this make file. All it does is goes and sees into the UI folder, runs npm npm run build, and then go build. And go build goes and pulls the dist folder from the build and embeds that into my project. So it's again one binary, deploys the entire thing. Super simple. I think that's about it. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you.
Is there any more? Is that all?
Next. I think that was all that we had. If everyone feels inspired, talk to together.
I can talk about them if you want.
I think I gotta go. Anyone has any comments about any of it? Yeah, didn't have a chance to.
So I have a quick question about your project on Go. When you run that, I mean, you're kind of talking about how it's not as scalable and all those other things. When you're running that, does it look pretty good to show like a V1 on there? Or is it pretty clunky or is it pretty smooth? Or what?
No, it's smooth, and you can actually handle a lot more. I kind of probably talked it down. SQLite has been pretty popular recently, especially on like Hacker News. I swear, it's like every other week SQLite's up there because it's really performant. You put it in wall mode. I don't remember exactly all of the specs, but like you can handle. I think the Pocket Base site says you can handle a medium-sized app. So let me look. I'll see if I can get the number. But it's like I want to say a couple thousand requests a second you can handle from there. So like for a lot of the stuff that I would want to do, like the app that I'm working on is for the school district, it'll easily handle.
Yeah.
So shouldn't be an issue. And then I think you could probably go in there and modify it, clean things up, add your own indexes and speed up the table.
So just because I'm a little bit naive with that, I'm thinking about a project that my wife is working on. I've actually never really used Go. So if you use that and then later you say this is too puny or this isn't going to work for what we need in the long term, I mean, is it pretty easy for you to migrate that over to something else that you've used in the past, a different stack, or what have you found?
I think it'd be pretty easy. Go is really good. So you could definitely just stay in Go. It's pretty easy to learn, really performant. It maybe is missing some of the batteries. It's not like .NET where you can just spin something up. But if you're long term and you know what you're building, I think it's worthwhile to build stuff in Go. And the nice thing about the way that they do the extendability, basically using Pocket Base as a framework, I haven't done this, but I'm pretty sure you could just go and piecemeal, okay, this route is slow, let's go replace it and put our own custom on it. And you slowly migrate the database over into cleaner things. So
Did you look at did you look at Superbase or?
I heard about that. I think I probably went towards this one because it was in Go and I was familiar with it, but I've heard there's a couple different really good options right now.
I use Superbase for mine because it uses Postgres behind the scenes, and then Postgres is a Postgres to Open API layer. So that I do like my code channel for Open API jump.
Yeah. So you could get types all the way across. I think someone the last time I was here was doing something with Open API and TypeScript. That's really cool. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
But you probably do that too with, I mean, I've seen some
similar things with MySQL. I haven't looked at SQLite. What do you mean when you say open API?
So Open API is just a